Hi, welcome to my latest video. I have said previously I am ridiculously far behind in videos. So yes, this is my November wrap up being filmed and published in January, nearly mid-January at that. So I apologise, you probably can't even remember what I'd said I was going to read in November anymore, so I could literally just make it up. And I also apologise if you can hear the rain. I'm filming in a conservatory, hence crappy lighting, and it's dusk and it's just started raining, so everything's against me right now. Right, let's get on because I need to get this done. Just to give you a few stats of November, I read 18 books in total. Don't panic, they're not all in this one video. 5 of those were 5-star, which is fantastic. 8 were 4-star, so it was a really good month. 2 3-stars, 1 2-star, and 2 1-stars. And one of the 1-stars is actually very, very surprising. I read the final 2 books in a trilogy, which is a zombie apocalypse trilogy. The first book is In the End by G.J. Stevens, and then I'd read this last year when it first came out, and then in November, I'm forgetting what I'm on about now, in November I read Before the End, which was a prequel, and then After the End, which was the sequel. And it's sort of like your run-of-the-mill zombie apocalypse. However, it does that kind of thing that I like, where it focuses on the people and the survivors and the kind of struggle more than, you know, like guns and fighting and stuff like that. So I really enjoyed that. Both of them 4 stars. Fantastic series, fantastic ending. Normally I'm not too keen on prequels, but I really like this one because it went back to like a completely different character, and that sounds a bit odd, but what it did then, it made it so that the 3rd book, the final in the trilogy, could bring those 2 characters together and show the kind of storylines in the other books where they've been separate, eventually met up, and then the ending. But yeah, I can't explain it too much, but yeah, it's a fantastic series, highly recommended for anyone who loves that kind of book. And the next book that I read was Everything That Makes Us Human by J. Mohan. This is the medical memoir of, in fact, I've got it here. Here we go. Forgot about that. This is the medical memoir of a children's brain surgeon. This was as fantastic and as upsetting as you might imagine it was. Every chapter focused on like different cases, different types of brain surgery. It's not just about the brain, as in brain surgery. It also covers like the spinal cord and the nerves and things like that. It was absolutely fascinating, some of the things that he works with, and the patients that he comes across, the families. But it was also really interesting to see how he, as a doctor, developed, and I guess like his kind of work ethic and morals. It's not just like textbook stuff. You've got to, there's like little nuances where you kind of develop your own ways to break bad news and things like that, and develop your own ways to explain treatment procedures to children, and that was really interesting to see. This was amazing. It was a 5-star book, as are most medical memoirs for me. Okay, back to the zombie apocalypse theme. I read The Living Dead by George Romero and Daniel Kraus. I started it months ago. I'm sure I started it in September, maybe a little longer. I was super excited to get this book as an ARC because Romero is big in the zombie world. I've said this before in other reviews, and I still think that making a zombie apocalypse boring is a very special kind of talent to have. this book, I don't understand. And it does seem to have very, very Marmite reviews, as in some people absolutely loved it, some people hated it. For me, it was so overwritten, and I mean, oh my God, I do not need to know all that information at all. I don't understand why all this information was in, like every single ship that somebody ever worked on in the Navy, and all the colleagues on that ship, and the ranks that they've held, and the promotions they've got, and people they've met on leave, and what they've ate for the dinner, and what they ate for the dinner the day before. And oh my God, it was so never ending. It never ended. It felt like it took me forever to get through this book. I'd had it as an ARC, as an ebook, and I eventually just had to go onto the audiobook because it had already been released by that point. Move on to the audiobook just to get it finished. I felt like I needed to finish it to write the review and to have a fully informed opinion, and it was still shit, to be honest. It's really put me off reading any more of Romero's work. I think it's just not my kind of thing. I do like books that get to the point and have some action in them. So unsurprisingly, that got a 1 star from me. And I'm sure many of you are very surprised that I'm giving a zombie book a 1 star, especially one that I was so hyped about. Gosh, this lighting is getting worse by the minute. Right, November was finally the month that I got Wild by Cheryl Strayed off my TBR. It's been on there since roughly 2014. And I even got the book out of the library at one point a few years ago, and then just never got around to reading it. So this time I went for the audiobook, and I'm so glad I did. It was absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed it. And it was fascinating to see or hear some of Cheryl's like kind of background and memories and stuff like that about relationships and events that had happened that sort of led to her ending up giving up on everything and walking the Pacific Crest Trail on like a journey of self-discovery, I guess you'd call it. I absolutely loved hearing about all the different people that she met along the way that were also doing the walk, whether it's in the same direction as her or she was passing them as they was going the other way. It was so interesting, the places she stayed, things like that. Literally, I'm one of them people, I'm massive into travelling. I absolutely love travelling. That's why this was on my TBR years ago. And I was like actually pausing the audiobook to Google how like I would go about walking the Pacific Crest Trail because it was just sounded fantastic. She made it sound so interesting. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book and ended up giving it a 4 stars. And I'm sure I'm not the only one out there that suddenly mid-month decides that you are going to be a mood reader despite all your wonderful planned TBR. So I suddenly got this idea in my head that I really desperately wanted to read a fantastic dystopian. I was just in the mood for getting stuck into one and getting lost in this crazy world. And so I had a look and I spotted The Birthyard as an audiobook. This is by Mallory Tater. In fact, it was the cover that got me. The cover is just incredible, I think. It really drew me in. And so basically, it's a world where girls and women are just meant for breeding. They are just meant to have babies and raise them, basically. But they don't get a choice of partner. So once they turn 18, girls are then paired off by the leader of society with eligible young men within society. Now, it could be somebody they know, it could be a stranger, it could be somebody that is 30 years older who happens to be looking for a mate or single, whatever. So they get paired off, and it's not like they then have a relationship. They then get allocated a time where they meet at this certain place under the, like, you know, with guardians whose job it is to kind of ensure they then have sex. And that keeps happening until the girl's pregnant. And then once the girl is in the second trimester, they get sent away to these like birth yards, and it's kind of like a camp where all the girls live together and they learn things that will make them good housewives and good mothers, I guess you could say. However, just to add to this craziness, the girls are given, they seem from the description kind of like ecstasy pills maybe, where the girls are like super high and like, you know, in a different like kind of mental world. They're just like, oh yeah, this is awesome, we're so happy. And it's to keep them like from rebelling and from doing things that they shouldn't be doing, and that they just accept everything that they're going through. And this young girl, Sable, who's like, I guess kind of like a chosen one in this story, she is not happy. She realises what's going on. She stops taking the pills. She starts like speaking to other girls and finding out secrets, and that people have got like dirt against the leaders of what's going on. And it's just this like really creepy dystopian world that you get lost in. I loved it. It ended up being 4 stars. And it was just exactly what I needed at that time. And then I listened to Hud Feminism by Mickey Kendall. This is a feminist collection of essays, but told from a black woman's point of view. Now, I am not a big reader of feminism works, so I was kind of just like, I don't understand how feminism has a colour to it. You know, how is surely feminism helps all women, and this is my ignorance completely. So when I read Hud Feminism, it was just like, what? Wow, really? Oh my god. You know, like all these like revelations that and like harsh truths that were being told to me that it hadn't even crossed my mind before. And what they were talking about was things like how traditional feminism often only takes into account like a white middle class woman perspective. So when we think of feminism, we kind of mainly think of like the big topics of equal pay at work, or equal rights to do certain jobs, or you know, women's rights to vote and things like that. But we don't think about how some women haven't even got to the point of those things being the concern, because they're still fighting for the basic needs. So I think it was saying in America, the majority of people that are, for example, that are living in poverty or in a housing crisis will be people of colour, and the majority of people that experience gun violence will be people of colour. And so if they're still trying to fight for survival, whereas the feminist kind of traditional stuff is beyond that level of need and is more focusing on other general things, or more like middle class needs, I guess, or wants, then feminism kind of doesn't help every woman, does it? And I never even thought of that before at all. So I thought there was like some really eye-opening stuff in that book. It's something that I would recommend for people like me who haven't thought about it as much. And I know that is because I'm in a privileged position where I earn decent money, I run my own business, I've got my own house, we're not struggling for food, I've got a university education, things like that. So yeah, I am white privileged, and it just shocked me how much I didn't realise what was going on, that feminism just doesn't even address it. So yeah, I really do recommend that for I guess other white privileged women, and then anybody who kind of just wants to know a bit more about different aspects of feminism and, you know, how it affects different races. I ended up giving that a 4 star. And then onto a thriller. I read House of Correction by Nikki French. This is about a lady called Tabitha. She has been accused of murder and she's in prison awaiting the trial. The problem is she does not remember what happened during that morning that the murder happened. All she knows is that she was found by the police in her house with the victim's blood on her, and the victim was dead in her garden or her shed, one of them, can't remember now. And so she is basically not only trying to fight her case, but fight to get the memories back. I absolutely loved this because it just kind of, it was like a different aspect to a thriller, because the woman is like, the murder's already happened, the woman's already in prison, and it was about this kind of perspective where she is trying to gather evidence and speak to people, but she's limited by the prison system and by what she's allowed to do and who she's allowed to speak to. But she's trying to prove her innocence, basically, and trying to figure out what actually went on. Now, the spanner in the works is that Tabitha has some mental health problems. She was suffering from depression, she was taking medication, and so that kind of throws a bit of, I guess, doubt over her mental state and what might have actually happened and why she's forgot things that have happened. Like, would you honestly have forgot that you've murdered somebody? And it was just fascinating. I don't know why I just got really caught up in this story. Really liked all the characters and how she managed to figure out the system and try and work it to her advantage to get information brought into her and things like that. And it was kind of like a closed setting mystery, because at the time of the murder there'd been a tree collapsed in a heavy storm. Literally, it's the only road out of the village, and a tree had collapsed over the road, so everybody was stuck. So whoever came into the village just before, or whoever was in the village just as the tree fell across the road, that was it. It had to be one of those people. So it was like a closed-in mystery, but also you had this like unreliable narrator that you just didn't know what was going on. And I found that really, really interesting, and it definitely deserved the 4 stars that I gave it. And I read I Kissed Alice by Anna Birch. If anybody has read Felix Ever After, to me this is the female version of that. It really did feel like that, only not done as well at all. So it's set in an art school again in America, and it's 2 queer characters who, you know, are enemies to lovers trope, and it just felt very, very similar. In fact, the characters in this were also competing for an art scholarship, which is what was happening in Felix Ever After. It just didn't hit the spot for me. Felix Ever After for me was 5 stars. I Kissed Alice ended up being 2 stars. I just couldn't connect properly. I didn't like the characters very much. I actually listened to this on audio, and I had significant problems up until midpoint of trying to figure out who was who, because even though they were different narrators for the 2 main characters, which is Rhodes and Ileana, the voices were very, very similar, and then the characters were also written very, very similar. So it was kind of just like I couldn't figure out who was speaking or who was doing what at one point. So we've got these 2 girls who hate each other. They're both at art school, but they don't realise, but they're speaking to each other on an online kind of platform and having this online sort of relationship where they're developing feelings for each other. They don't realise it's, you know, these 2, that they're actually enemies in real life. So it's very cliched, and I don't know why, it just didn't do it for me at all. The characters just didn't feel very well developed. It was very, very blunt, this I hate you and I hate you and nah, and like arguing and fighting over things, and it was just very, very 2-dimensional. You know, like they absolutely hated each other, and then they go to getting together, and yeah, I just didn't enjoy it at all. And then let's finish off with a 5-star book, Be Not Far From Me by Mindy McGuinness. This was another I'm just in the mood to read, and it was, I guess, like a survival story. I do really like kind of people getting lost in the wild or in like natural disasters and then surviving. So I had been thinking about a non-fiction, and then I suddenly spotted this and was like, do you know what, I'm going to read that. It sounds really great. So we follow a girl called Ashley. I think they're like late teens, and she and her friends go out like camping and partying in the woods one night. However, she gets up middle of the night and spots that her boyfriend isn't in the sleeping bag next to her where he should be, and also that her friend isn't. And she then discovers them out in the trees somewhere, you know, getting it on. And so she runs off in like a blind, wild, upset panic. And she runs and runs and runs in the dark, and then falls down a ravine. And then the next morning, she realises how bad the situation is that she's in. She's in this ravine. She's got nothing with her, no food, water, no clothes, no medical equipment, nothing. And to make it worse, her friends think that she's actually gone home, that she was that upset that she left, and they don't realise that she's still in the woods missing. So then they go home, and you know, they think that she's just not replying to them and not answering the phone, but actually she's stuck in the forest still. All sorts happen. She's having to find food and water, and it's just absolutely fantastic. It's literally like one long sort of monologue of just her and her surviving and what's going on around her, and it was just very, very like minimalist, I guess. But I think that made it really chilling, because obviously there's no interaction. She's got nobody she can speak to. All that can happen is like disaster type stuff and survival. And it is just that, like, her thoughts, talking to herself and trying to figure things out. And right, well, if I head there, what will happen next? And then that, you know, she starts struggling from lack of food and water, and then her mental state deteriorating. Absolutely amazing book. I thoroughly enjoyed this. And I mean, I loved every minute of it. Definitely 5 stars, easy. And that's the first part of my November wrap up done. So hopefully the second part will be up in a few days, then I can start on the December one. So yeah, I will get caught up at some point, honest. Right, so thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you all soon. Bye.